In this video we'll have a look at relaxant herbs and the correction of the wind constriction tissue state. So let's have a closer look first at the constricted tissue state. Constriction can arise from physical or psychological tension. Prolonged emotional stress increases smooth muscle and skeletal muscle tension, and physical tension may be due to emotional constriction, so anxiety. Symptoms of the constricted state include neuromuscular tension or rigidity, so spasm, colic, anxiety, bronchospasm in bronchial asthma, and also characterized by fluctuating symptoms, so lots of quick changes, alternating fevers and chills, alternating diarrhea and constipation in IBS, symptoms changing location, so flitting pains of rheumatoid arthritis. Clinical signs: hands and feet are often cold, the pulse may be wiry, tense and hard, the tongue may be hairy, but the colour varies. Consequences of the constricted tissue state: it can result in atrophy of the tissues, stagnation, tissue depression. So you start off with constriction first, and then other abnormal tissue states can follow from that. And indeed, in Chinese medicine, a lot of pain is recognized as being due to a blockage of qi, and this is really what's happening with wind constriction, is you get local constriction, local blockages, and that flow of qi through the body becomes interrupted, and that causes problems either locally or globally for the body, or both. So we treat constricted states with relaxants, and these roughly correspond with antispasmodics, carminatives and tranquilizers. There's a crossover with the functions of sedatives, and a lot of herbs are both relaxant and sedative. So let's see if we can differentiate between the two though. Relaxants reduce activity by reducing tension and blocking the flow of vital force. Now, so that you're not just a sort of flopped jelly in your chair, your muscles and tissues throughout your body are in a constant state of relative tension, and in the wind constricted state that level of tension has been ramped up so that you're really tense. So then it doesn't take very much more irritation or stimulation to then just tip it over the edge and you go into spasm. So if you've ever sort of put your neck out getting enraged with something, that's the wind constriction state. Conversely, well, not conversely, but separately, sedatives reduce activity by reducing the irritation, the amount of heat in the system. So sedatives work by making tissues less irritable. In terms of taste, relaxant herbs often taste acrid. Small amounts of an acrid tasting herb, like that wild yam you tasted the other weekend, have a relaxant effect. Larger amounts can be irritant. So for example, lobelia inflata, as a relaxant for smooth muscle cramps, fine at small doses. Give higher doses, it causes a strong reaction and an emetic reaction. And we see this with cough remedies generally. If you give a small dose, it stimulates the cough, but if you give a higher dose, it doesn't just stimulate the cough, but it makes you throw up as well. Anyway, that's kind of like a tangent. The main thing is this acrid taste. Just a hint of an acrid taste will give that reflex kind of relaxant effect. Other acrid relaxants besides lobelia would include valerian, simsfuga, Dioscorea and Viburnum, both Viburnum opulus and Viburnum prunifolium. There are also relaxant bitters. So chamomile is relaxant partly due to its bitter sesquiterpenes. They have that relaxant effect. And a lot of sweet aromatic herbs are also relaxant. So here we've got this thing where they're stimulants. The volatiles are stimulating to the body, but they also relax as well. So just to prove to you that they're stimulating and relaxing are not opposites. They can coexist and indeed work together very well. There are many relaxants in the herbal literature alongside other actions. Have a look at your level 1 monographs of Chamomilla ricotita, Dioscorea villosa and Viburnum opulus, and just look at the menu as first and foremost relaxant herbs. So in this video lecture we'll look briefly in detail, if you can do such thing, at just 3 herbs: valerian, Simsfuga and lobelia. Valerian first. Slightly acrid, it's quite pungent, relaxant and warming. We use the roots primarily, but you can use the aerial parts to some extent. Principal actions, well, it's a relaxant, antispasmodic, particularly indicated for muscle cramps, period pain, intestinal colic. It has a blood pressure lowering effect by dilating the arteries, and it's good as a hypnotic for insomnia. I think it's Felter Lloyd said that valerian restores enfeebled cerebral circulation, so it's good for headaches and migraines. So headaches where that has resulted from a sort of paucity of blood in the brain. Constituents, well, there's been a 50-year search for what is the constituent that makes valerian so useful as a sort of knockout drops, and focus has been placed on all sorts of different compounds. Valipotrates were going to be the answer at one stage, and then thought, well, maybe not. Valerianic acid. Somebody said, oh my goodness, it contains gamma aminobenzoic acid, which is indeed true in a small amount, but it has limited bioavailability. So I would discount that as being the real cause of why valerian has such a relaxant effect. It undoubtedly does work on the GABA receptors, but we're not quite sure how, and it's quite likely that all these different constituents have a synergistic effect to give valerian the sum total of its actions. Contraindications and cautions. Well, it can increase nervous agitation, especially if you give it in high doses or where there is atrophy and heat. So somebody's agitated and hot, valerian might just make them worse. Valerian actually enhances the effect of the benzodiazepines, and in fact one of the former market leaders of benzodiazepine drugs, Valium, the drug companies gave it that name so that it would resonate with valerian. They said, oh, it's called Valium, it must have an effect like valerian. So that kind of makes sense on the continent, and probably didn't make much sense in this country, but that's where Valium got its name, not because it's derived from valerian, but because the initial effects were perceived to be similar to valerian, a sort of like synthetic valerian, if you like. So there could be an enhanced effect, but that can play a plus point, because valerian then has a role in a phase withdrawal of benzodiazepines. Valerian could potentiate other sedative drugs, so the beta blockers, tricyclic antidepressants, and so on. So just cautions with that. Now, Simsfuga racemosa. In recent times it's been touted mainly as a menopausal remedy, but traditionally it's regarded as a nervine, relaxant and sedative. It has quite a cooling effect, it's quite acrid but sweet as well, it creates an upward movement in the body, and we use the rhizome. Principal actions, well, it's a relaxant, anti-inflammatory again, specific for painful and contracted conditions of both the male and female reproductive system. So it's good for that spasmodic dysmenorrhea with really sort of strong cramps. It also has a use for rheumatism, neuromuscular aches, pains and inflammation and contractions around the joints. So for arthritis, neuralgia, sciatica. It's a relaxant sedative, so lowers its effect. It can be used for hypertension, for tachycardia, sort of kind of cardiac sedative really, and useful for menopausal symptoms, hot sweats, anxiety, tension, which is what it's touted for mainly, as I've said, in modern times. But it's also restorative for the reproductive organs, so it's good for amenorrhea, bringing on periods, and for preparing the uterus for parturition, for birth. It strengthens the contractions and relaxes the cervix. If it's a relaxant, I don't really understand why it's useful for uterine prolapse, but maybe it's much more complex than just being a relaxant. So, as you probably know, it's got triterpene saponins in and isoflavones. So these are some of the saponins. So it's one of these phytoestrogenic herbs. Contraindicated in pregnancy except during labour, and high doses can give headaches and indigestion. So the top dose really would be 30 mils a week, and more likely to be 15. Just remember, Simus fuga is in the buttercup family. They're an Unculaceae, and that's quite famous for containing acrid, poisonous plants. So just to finish off with Lobelia inflata Indian tobacco. It's bitter, warm and pungent. We use the whole herb. Principally a relaxant, particularly on the respiratory system. Now it's got this complex action on the respiratory system. It's a stimulant and a relaxant at the same time. So it relaxes the bronchi to help with asthma, but it also has an expectorant, a stimulating expectorant effect. So opens up the airways and then helps you cough out that horrible mucus plug that is preventing you from breathing properly. Also has application in croup, whooping cough, pertussis, and all the rest of it. Antispasmodic for skeletal and smooth muscle, and it's relaxing, stimulating to the liver and gallbladder. It has a diaphoretic effect, so it's quite useful in reducing fever. Where there's a cold and deficient circulation, it will sort of push things out to the exterior. And it has an amphoteric effect on the autonomic nervous system. It balances up the parasympathetic activity, particularly in the lungs, as we've seen. Constituents: it has piperidine alkaloids that are related to nicotine, so there's possibility that it can be used to help people give up smoking. Contraindications, just to reiterate, large doses are emetic. That was the primary use for it in the 19th century. Avoid it with a shock paralysis or weakness. So maximum dose 40 mils a week, and remember it's Schedule 20 herb. So if nothing else will do, you can use these heavyweight antispasmodics: Atropa, Hyoscyamus, Henbane, Datura or Gelsemium. And remember, Schedule 20 dosage is critical.